Tonight, verdict watch. 7 men and 5 women deliberate Trump's fate. Did the judge make it a foregone conclusion?
Mother Teresa could not beat these charges. These charges are rigged.
Landslide. NewsNation's new model shows a red wave coming. Joe Biden's new plan to mobilize black voters. And funny guy.
Yeah, I get the toxic. I get it. But still, I like a real man.
Jerry Seinfeld says he misses dominant masculinity in American culture. Why masculinity isn't toxic anymore.
Well, he's sexual, athletic, and without a trace of self-consciousness.
Start with breaking news. Live pictures of New York City. 4 hours of deliberation and still no verdict in Donald Trump's business records case. The jury sent a host of questions to the judge. They'll start back with deliberations and the answers to those in the morning. We're going to get to it all in a minute, including the judge's instructions to the jury, which Donald Trump says makes a conviction inevitable.
Mother Teresa could not beat these charges. These charges are rigged. The whole thing is rigged. It was all done by Joe Biden. This judge contributed to Joe Biden, and far worse than that.
To be fair, Trump might be right, not about Mother Teresa, but about getting a fair trial. Biden won New York City by a 70-point margin. Honest Democrats will tell you the charges against Trump are dubious at best. We as a country can't really come back from this. The Manhattan District Attorney ran on prosecuting Donald Trump. He's a local DA who took it upon himself to charge the former president of the United States with a crime without any victims. While the jury considers 34 felony counts against Trump in New York, consider this in a few years. We now have a precedent of local district attorneys indicting former presidents for political reasons. You can't come back from that. My thoughts turn to what the New York trial foretells for the rest of America. Not because of what it does or doesn't do to Donald Trump, but because of what it does to America. There's a picture of Joe Biden over my shoulder right now, this shoulder, for a reason. Joe Biden isn't popular in Barton County, Missouri. It's not far from where I grew up. The local prosecutor and judge are registered Republicans there. Trump won in 2020 with 85% of the vote. The county has a 72.5% margin of victory for Republicans dating back to 2016. So moving forward, what keeps a rural district attorney in Missouri, Barton County, from figuring out how to indict Hunter Biden or Joe Biden? Maybe Hunter's consulting company once paid an invoice in his county, giving him jurisdiction to investigate. The rural DA impanels a grand jury in an 80% red county. The grand jury indicts Joe or Hunter Biden on conspiracy to commit bribery charges. 10 years ago, you would have told me I was absolutely crazy to bring this hypothetical up, but now suddenly it doesn't seem all that crazy. There's probably some Republicans who love that idea. Maybe the star witness can be a felon and perjurer like Michael Cohen. The judge's instructions today were pretty clear. If you find that any witness has intentionally falsified testimony, you may disregard that witness's entire testimony. The jury will hear those instructions again tomorrow morning, and we start tonight with Michael DeSharo, New York City criminal defense lawyer. With us in studio, Tom Dupree, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General under George W. Bush, and Shan Wu, former federal prosecutor and DOJ official. Gentlemen, thanks to you all for being here. Michael, start with you. Since you know and practice in New York in these courtrooms on a daily basis, Donald Trump said basically that the jury instructions were so broad, so bland, so milquetoast, that it's not about indicting a ham sandwich, it's that you could convict a ham sandwich. Does he have a point?
I think he does legally based on Supreme Court precedent and simply telling the jury that they can pick up whatever theory they find available from the prosecution without having to prove each one. They can basically, it's a buffet they can choose from. I don't think this case survives on appeal if there's a conviction. It also makes the case extremely difficult to defend, because if you're defending against multiple theories, then you have to be ready to present defensive evidence on those theories. So this is I'm on record as saying this is a jury instruction that we haven't seen in a while. I haven't come across it. I've spoken to a lot of people, a lot of appeals attorneys, and they're on the same ilk. This is a bizarre jury instruction.
Look, and there's people who are very unhappy about this jury instruction, and since it's cable news and we're on verdict watch, there's hours and hours of punditry, and there's people who are very happy about this. Andrew Weissman from MSNBC a little earlier today. Take a listen.
You know, I felt like a man crush on him. He is such a great judge that it's hard to see that the jurors wouldn't have the same impression. I mean, you just keep on thinking, if you looked in a dictionary for like judicial temperament, that's what you get.
Shan-Woo, is there a danger in the judge becoming effectively a player and a political player in the trial?
Oh, absolutely. But of course, the million-dollar question is he really becoming a political player in the trial? I don't think he has been. I think he's been very, walking the line with his rulings and such. I also disagree on the jury instructions. I think there have been jury instructions with this type of case, which allows the jury to choose sort of this buffet idea of what was the unlawful means as well as the objective crime. So I think there's precedent for that, actually.
So when we put it up on the screen, right, there's 34 counts, 12 involving checks, 11 involving business records, 11 involving invoices. And falsifying those, if that's done, is a misdemeanor. You have to get to a felony by saying there's an underlying crime, meaning either federal election, state election, or a tax issue. Tom Dupree, I think about what we said initially, which is this would have never been prosecuted or even investigated had it not been a former president who was very unpopular in a Democratic state. Can local prosecutors now around the country, is it open season on presidents they don't like or former presidents?
Well, look, I think this prosecution will be historic in many respects, one of which is, to your point, I do think it has opened the door now to at least entertaining that possibility. And when you look at the map of America, you look at so many red states, so many red jurisdictions, you look at jurisdictions where you have crusading DAs of a conservative bent wanting to make a name for themselves, it doesn't take, kind of a great legal mind to come up with some theory on which you could bring an indictment, either against a former president, members of the former president's family. And look, maybe the charges will stick, maybe they won't, but you'll have made a name for yourself. You'll put the fear of God into that person. And if that person is running for re-election or running for some office, you keep them off the campaign trail. So let's hope that this doesn't become a precedent. But I think the real dangerous precedent potentially has been set.
Yeah, I think you have to distinguish, though, between a legal precedent and sort of a precedent-setting decision to do. So I think historically, there has not been a legal reason why they can't do this, but it's been kind of like the protocol.
It's a norm.
It's a norm. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a norm. So I think the solution to this, Leland, though, it'll be a very bad solution, in my opinion, to have a legal safeguard for it, such as the Supreme Court weighing in saying former presidents can never be prosecuted for anything. That doesn't make any sense to me. I think it's a question of, is this a norm-busting situation, and will this become a new norm or not? But I don't know that there's a legal solution.
Yeah, there may not be, and that's what sort of makes it so dangerous, right? And we've even seen the Attorney General, I think of Missouri, my home state, very much trying to make a name for himself, going after various things that you'd think the Attorney General of Missouri would not necessarily have jurisdiction over, but here we are for a different time. Michael, just to get to the nuts and bolts of this case, you've got a request by the jury for a readback of testimony that could last an hour tomorrow. Then you've got a request to go through the jury instructions over again, which the jurors were not provided a copy of. Can we read the tea leaves at all?
I believe so. They started deliberating and they realized how confused they are. They want to hear they're willing to listen to another hour of jury instructions in order to try to get some clarity. Usually that doesn't happen. Usually when it comes to readback, we want to hear this witness's testimony, we want to hear the answer to this question. But to have because they're desperate for guidance and they want to hear this again in hopes of trying to figure out how to proceed. And there's also two attorneys on the jury, which they may help. I expect a lot more readback in these cases and a lot more requests for additional evidence.
Yeah, and you think about, Tom, where they started in the readback. They started at the beginning of the trial with David Pecker. So they're going to go through that, and then there's going to be an argument over, okay, what did witness number 4 and 5 say?
Right. And look, I think this tells us a few things. One is that this is a jury that does appear actually to be taking its responsibility seriously. Yeah. You have some cases where a jury will go in, they'll come back in 30 minutes with some verdict. That's not this jury. They're taking their job seriously. The fact
they have a book to write, okay? A lot of them already have book contracts that they've got to fulfill. They're taking notes.
They sat through a 5-hour closing argument yesterday from the prosecution. They're clearly gluttons for punishment because now they want to hear the jury instructions read again, which no rational person would want. Those are an hour-long instructions. They want it. They're like, bring on the legalese. But look, I think they're taking it seriously, and we will see in the coming days whether they do go back for more pieces of testimony. I do think the fact that they asked for those pieces of testimony from kind of the early part of the timeline does suggest, we're reading tea leaves, but it suggests that they may be following the prosecution's model of walking through the whole episode in kind of a temporal sense.
I agree with that, although I can play the devil's advocate here, which is if they're going to be rigorous in their analysis, you're going to start chronologically at the start, too. So that's what I think they're following right now.
Well, if it's chronological in terms of the trial, we all have a number of days to fill with conversation. Michael, thank you for joining us from New York. Your input and analysis is always much appreciated. Shan Wu here. Thank you very much. Tom Dupree. Gentlemen, good to see both of you. Thank you. There is polling, and then there is data, real data from the best in the world. A new model is telling us what? Well, predicting that the Republicans will take the House, Senate, and White House. Is that because of Donald Trump or maybe in spite of him?
This is 5 weeks, and 5 weeks of really essentially not campaigning, although I took a big lead in the polls over the last few weeks. Something's going on. Because I think the people of this country see that this is a rigged deal.
And Israel vows they'll still be fighting Hamas come November, even as the Biden administration and the world turn against them. Can Israel ever regain the moral high ground?
I do not believe the people of Israel want to kill everybody in Gaza. I don't believe they're starving the people of Gaza. I believe Hamas is making it hard for food to get in. And when it comes in, they steal it.
The split screen over the past, say, week or so has shown absolutely everything you need to know between President Trump and President Biden. Trump's been in the New York courthouse for most of the past 5 weeks for the business records trial. Deliberations are underway right now. That's split screen number one. He hasn't been able to campaign much, and it's been one of his biggest complaints throughout the trial. Meanwhile, President Biden has had plenty of time to campaign. His rallies and speeches have been few in number. Had a big one today. We're going to talk about that a little later. We have some new data out from Decision Desk HQ showing that the split screen may actually be helping Donald Trump more than it is helping Joe Biden. I wanted to show you this presidential election prediction. Biden 42%, Trump 58%. These are not poll numbers. This is a statistical model that takes in donations, polling, trends, all sorts of information, the 2022 midterms, and spits out a prediction of the chance of Donald Trump winning, the chance of Joe Biden winning, the electoral map here in terms of the forecast from Decision Desk HQ. Biden 226, Trump 235, and toss-up is 93. When you take away the toss-ups, that's how you get to the potential win by Donald Trump. The predicted win, I should say. Not United States prediction, predicted win by Donald Trump. 56% chance of winning Pennsylvania, 58 Wisconsin, Nevada 51%, Arizona 59%, Georgia a 63% chance of winning. That'd be a huge reversal from 2020. And Michigan, they give a slight lead to Joe Biden. Scott Traynor is the head of data science for Decision Desk HQ and is with us now. How is this, and we talked about it a little bit in the intro, different than a poll?
Well, it takes into polling, but it also takes in, as you pointed out, FEC data, fundraising, demographics, historical trends, who won there in the past, all these things that are factual, objective data. and takes away the emotion, and then makes what we have historically known to be an accurate prediction. It also moves up and down. We're going to get new data. We're going to get new polling. We're going to get fundraising data. We're going to have new voter registrations, all that. And so this is going to move around a lot over the next few months.
All right, Senate prediction, 79% chance that the GOP wins the Senate. You guys say 52-48. House prediction, 64% chance that Republicans win the House, a full sweep. How correlated is all this?
It's pretty correlated. Look, what we're predicting, about a 51% chance that there's a GOP trifecta, in the sense that the GOP wins the presidency, House, and Senate. If Donald Trump wins the presidency, he's going to take a couple Senate seats with him. He's also going to take a couple of House seats with him, and that's where we think it goes. And that's why the model is all-encompassing. It takes into effect all these different trends.
So we're going to see throughout the next 5 months the model shift, right?
Yeah.
So if we put up the presidential prediction, it could be that it becomes a toss-up, 50-50. That doesn't necessarily mean they're polling at 50-50. This is Donald Trump, who I think would very much like to see these numbers, talking today about his situation. This is what he said. This is 5 weeks. 5 weeks I haven't been campaigning. One of his big complaints, although I took a big lead in the polls over the last few weeks, something's going on because I think the people of this country see that it's a rigged deal. Big complaint every day that he's outside, that he's in court rather than campaigning. Is part of the reason he's doing better, and this model is what it's at, is because Donald Trump is not out on the campaign trail every day?
It could be. Here's what I do know for sure. Look, he's not out on the campaign trail. There's a lot of news out there, and he is still favored to win, especially not only at the top line, but you saw all of those battleground states. He has held a pretty steady lead there. Now, we're going to see what happens when there's a verdict. We looked at the model output today. We're going to look at it in a week or two.
How do you model a conviction?
Well, look, the conviction's going to change polling. It's going to change fundraising. It may change voter registration. Some of those things may take a little time to make it through the model, but we have a good reference point today, and we're going to know where it's at in a few weeks and a few months.
All right, so does the model take into account, right, and maybe the answer is only through polling, the changing in messaging, say, from the Biden administration now, all of a sudden leaning into Donald Trump's on trial, he's a threat to democracy, on and on?
Yeah, and here's how it does it. It looks at Biden's approval rating. It looks at Trump's approval rating. It looks at the national ballot, how Biden's doing just across the country. And that is the direct reflection of what people think of Joe Biden's policies, what Trump's saying on the trail. It takes those into account. And we're going to see that move up and down over the next month, especially post-debate.
Yeah, post-debate, 27. And it'd probably be fascinating because this is the first time we're going to get a long time to bake in the debate results into this. I'm going to ask you this question every time you come back. You're a betting man.
Yeah.
That's what data does.
Yeah.
How confident are you in this? How much would you bet today out of $1,000 in your pocket?
If the election were held today, I'd be betting $400 or $500 on Donald Trump, and I'd probably be betting $200 or $300 on the GOP winning the trifecta.
Wow. All right. There we go. Man who puts his money where his mouth is.
Yeah.
Good to see you, my friend, as always. This is fascinating. Thank you. Jerry Seinfeld. Yeah, that Jerry Seinfeld. He's back. And he suddenly thinks America is not manly enough. You don't really think of Jerry Seinfeld and manly going together. But he now says, well, the woke movement needs to be laughed off the American stage.
Women really want to see what the show is before they change the channel.
Oh, that is so funny. Yeah.
That's why men hunt and women nest.
Today, Joe Biden's dream of the Gaza war ending before the election died. It's no more. The Israeli government says fighting will continue through 2024, which means the political headaches for the White House will only continue to get worse into migraine-level headaches. Ivy League students will continue to parrot terrorist talking points. 125 hostages will likely stay underground, including a number of Americans raped and mutilated. People will continue to look away as burning children in Rafah die on the evening news, and President Biden will get blamed by both sides. MSNBC's Simone Sanders posted this to Twitter. The statements from some administration officials about not being able to verify what's happening in Gaza are absurd. We can all see the pictures. It's horrific. White House political commentator for our partners at The Hill. It says commentator. I thought you were a columnist.
Yeah, either
Niall Stanage, you do both.
I do.
It's good to see you, my friend.
Good
Thank
to see
you. You and I have differing views on what's happening and how to deal with what's happening in Gaza. Let's just stick at the White House for a second. Mm-hmm. How big of a problem for the White House is the fact that this is not going to be wrapped up before November?
I honestly think it's election losing, or at least potentially so. You're right that you and I have very different perspectives on this, but the problem is, as a political matter, this is catastrophic for the president, who is already experiencing difficulties in enthusiasm among key Democratic blocs. Young voters, black voters, progressive voters, all of those blocs are the same blocs outraged about Israel's behavior in Gaza.
And you have done, I think, a superb job, yeoman's work, of pressing the White House on this issue from, I would say, the left flank, because the White House is trying to drive down the middle of the road of this. Is the anger from the left starting to scare? What's the right adjective for what it's doing to the White House?
I think the White House does actually appreciate the scale of the political danger that they're in, and they're aware of the anger on the left. The difficulty is they haven't done very much, practically speaking, to assuage that anger. They paused one arms shipment, but then they were worried about their right flank, so they said, well, it's only one arms shipment. We're continuing with all the other arms. Israel will have everything to defend itself. I do get that they're trying to thread a needle. I just don't think they've done so very successfully.
Well, look, on issues of moral clarity, that I think the left demands a certain amount of moral clarity, the pro-Israel wing demands one. Threading a needle doesn't work, right? Young voters overwhelmingly disapprove. Republicans overwhelmingly disapprove. Independents overwhelmingly disapprove. It's difficult to get all of those sides to agree that you are doing a really awful job. I'm wondering about the messaging, because there was a Israeli airstrike in Rafah. We will put up a map. This is the IDF's map of where the strike happened. There were 2 Hamas terrorists that they were going after and eliminated. And about 600 feet away, 200 meters, there was a UN compound of tents. The tents went up in flames, and a number of people died, 45 civilians. There is now a lot of questions as to whether or not Hamas was using the tents as munition storage and using the UN to hide them.
Or whether other flammable materials like cooking oils and innocent materials.
All true and reasonable. That said, you saw what happened after the hospital got hit, allegedly by the Israelis. Turns out it was Islamic Jihad's own rockets hitting its own hospital. Is there a willingness to go all in on things that blame Israel, and when the Palestinians are to blame for things, then no one seems that interested?
No, here's where I think our differences reassert themselves here. I think there are mirror images of each other. Yes, people who are very pro-Palestinian have a tendency to automatically blame Israel. I also think there is an enormous tendency, not only among pro-Israel people, but among many swathes of the media, to let Israel off the hook for things that it has done by its own admission. Israel, in the first week of this conflict, dropped 6,000 bombs. They said they dropped 6,000 bombs on Gaza. Gaza is about the same size as the city of Atlanta. 6,000 bombs in that area are obviously going to cause vast civilian deaths.
No, there's no question that it's going to cause civilian deaths. That is a fact of wars, that civilians die. This would be my last question, though. For people who want to see much stronger, and we're seeing this across the American left, a much stronger response to Israel, handcuffs put on Israel.
Restraint.
Would there not be a much higher moral ground to come from if they showed equal outrage to what Hamas was doing to its own people?
I don't really accept the premise of the question. The answer in simple terms is yes, but I don't think that it is quite right to say that it's not at all right to say they excuse Hamas. You might find that if you spot 1 or 2 protesters, the vast majority of people protesting in this country about Israel's conduct of the war are quite understandably outraged by the amount of civilian death and destruction it has caused.
All right. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks for the analysis. Appreciate it. President Biden travels to city of brotherly love, that is Philadelphia, to court voters who seem to be running away from his campaign in droves. The Palestinian issue and the black vote intersect in Philadelphia. Where's the love for Joe Biden among this group when we come back? Voters, President Biden loses. It is really that simple. Poll after poll, though, show him hemorrhaging support among that very important group. Here you go. Biden has lost 23% of the black vote since 2020. Donald Trump has gained 10%. Today, his campaign launched Black Voters for Biden-Harris in Pennsylvania. It's the third or fourth reset with black voters in the last 2 years. Here's President Biden speaking at that event.
And then Trump tells you he's the greatest president. I love this one. He says he's the greatest president for black people in the history of America, including more than Abraham Lincoln. I mean, can you fathom that? Where in the hell? Like I said, I think he injected too much of that bleach in his country.
Sean Spicer, NewsNation contributor, host of the Sean Spicer Show. Got a chuckle out of him. Scott Bolden, NewsNation contributor, lawyer, and former D.C. Democratic Party chairman. General, good to see you.
Got a chuckle out of me, too.
Yeah. Oh, did I?
Yeah, we both
good.
chuckled.
Double chuckle.
Okay. Well, that's good. We'll just keep it going throughout the segment. Scott, you're entitled to your own opinions, not your own facts on this program. Can we all agree that Joe Biden right now has a problem with African-American voters?
He's got a challenge with African-American voters and
Why?
brown voters, too. I think because the issues, the tabletop issues, the economy are affecting all of us, one. And two, the administration hasn't been great at communicating a more positive message. And three, the Democrats tend to ignore black voters except when it's election time, whether that's real or perceived. And I also think this. I think younger voters have a strip of conservative or culture conservatism. I was just reading Nationscape did a study on this, and there are those who want the Democratic Party to talk more about civil rights, about health disparities, as well as gun violence, which we can all agree on is a challenge in America, especially in our communities, our poor communities.
No, disproportionately affects.
And so Biden's got to do more work and shore up his base.
All right, so here's what he's done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he stopped the menthol cigarette bans. He's eased marijuana rules, pardoned a bunch of people for marijuana, and now is going to deschedule it as a federal issue. Student debt cancellations. He spoke overwhelmingly about infrastructure investments in black and brown communities. Mm-hmm. He's worked on police reform and has obviously continued to press hard on affirmative action, all of these things. Sean Spicer, this is what Donald Trump says is the reason for his success with black voters. Take a listen.
The mugshot, we've all seen the mugshot. And you know who embraced it more than anybody else? The black population. It's incredible. You see black people walking around with my mugshot. You know, they do shirts and they sell them for $19 a piece. It's pretty amazing.
I don't know if he got a sympathy laugh from that crowd or what exactly it was. That said, especially with younger African Americans, may not be the mugshot, but with younger male African Americans, he's tapped into something. What is it?
I think it's more of the economic message, this idea of hope and prosperity, the idea that it's not just government that's the answer to everything. I think that's actually the difference. Where you're seeing is young male African Americans who believe in the American dream, want to do something, want to build a business, and look and see the opposite, which is the Biden administration and Democrats in general pandering to them, saying it's more government when in fact they want less government. You see, this demographic is young black men, and I think that they actually don't like getting grouped into a big whole pot and saying, this is what you all want, more government, more this, more that. I think actually they want more opportunity.
Interestingly enough, and I know you said that the mugshot comment was
I would respectfully disagree with you.
No, but I actually think most of what I agree with a lot of what Scott said. I just think that if you actually look, it's not that, and as much as I'd like us to be doing better with the entire segment of that group of Americans, I think that why it's young black men in particular is because they've got an entrepreneurial spirit in them where they want to build a business and they want to say, I don't need the government. I actually need less government intervention. I need more opportunity.
So to be fair,
Biden has.
Well, he's invested, but he's invested in the black community in the way.
It's pandering. I mean, that's the problem. You saw when he went down to Morehouse and did, and it's just a
we had that sound, but we had that soundbite. You were there. Hold on, let us play it.
I was.
It's natural to wonder if democracy you hear about actually works for you. What is democracy? If black men are being killed in the street, what is democracy? The trail of broken promises still leave black communities behind. What is democracy? You have to be 10 times better than anyone else to get a fair shot.
You're talking to a lot of people who grew up in Democratic states and in Democratic-controlled cities and have been for decades, if not, have been for decades. How can President Biden, and maybe this is what you were talking about, say, just give us a little more time to continue the very same policies?
Well, I don't think he's saying that. I think he's saying that we've kept our promises, one. And by the way, his representation in that speech in Morehouse speaks to issues that are important to the black community. It's not pandering, it's political reality. What did he say? We have to be twice as good. I am as successful under the American dream as anyone else and stuff, and I face racism every day. I can't hide the color of my skin, and so I face those challenges. Whether economics separates us, race still binds us in this country. We don't have a colorblind society. So when he speaks to those race issues and say we've been left behind and gun violence, right? Those are real issues he needs to be speaking to, but I wish he would be speaking to fixing those issues, empowering the black community, and then showing them the manifestation of the success of the Democratic Party. They're not getting that. Trump promises that, if you will. It's not the fact that they've gone to jail or anything. That's rather insulting.
But Trump did criminal justice reform. That was the thing.
I think fundamentally one of the things that's missing is the messenger. Biden's been in office for half a century. This is a guy who literally has videos of him over and over again talking about the Biden crime bill and cracking down on criminals. I think if you're any population that looks at a guy like this and says, so let me get this straight, after 50 years, suddenly you care about our community. Trump, in 4 years, can sit there and talk about what he did in terms of employment, the criminal justice reform bill, all these things, and say, hey, I got into office, I actually delivered for you, right? Biden, after 50 years, says, if you give me more time, here's what I'll do for you. There is a lack of credibility that exists with Joe Biden, not just in the African-American community, but among so many populations in this country who say, look, you've had your chance.
Biden's got a much better I'll compare Biden's record with the African-American community and brown communities than Donald Trump ever can. That'll be a long discussion.
I'm going to give myself the last word. It was the African-American community that saved Joe Biden in South Carolina in 2020. So
exactly.
There's some good
fantasy that Republicans.
I said I get the last word. That means I've got to get to the next segment.
Oh, okay. Well,
that's why I said I get the last word.
Yeah, but I was talking quick.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Dominant masculinity. You see it is at play right here on this set. Evidently, it's cool again. Same with patriotism. A host of other recently taboo personality traits. Just ask the fellas sitting here or Jerry Seinfeld, who was on Bari Weiss's podcast called Honestly.
I miss a dominant masculinity. Yeah, I get the toxic thing. I get it. But still, I like a real man.
Contributing editor for City Journal and New York Times best-selling author Heather McDonald is with us. Is there an irony here, Heather, of Jerry Seinfeld, who you don't exactly think is going to get cast in the next season of Yellowstone, talking about this?
Well, I'm going to take the message from whoever wants to send it out, because Seinfeld is absolutely right. We are disappearing males from our culture. That is going to be the end of our civilization. Males gave us civilization. Feminism has been zero-sum. It has torn down males in order to elevate females. That was a completely mistaken war. It continues to go on today. We just look recently, the Boy Scouts of America removed the last vestige of reference to boys from its title because it couldn't even stand to have the boy within associated to Boy Scouts of America. They've already admitted girls. Boys are not allowed their own organizations any longer. Females are. Females get constant encouragement. Do STEM. Do, be the best you can be. Go into the military. It's amazing that boys try to do anything because they are being disappeared from our culture.
You think about the pendulum swinging back, which I think we can all agree it is on a whole host of issues. Here's Jon Stewart from The Daily Show.
Of course, nothing about the right-wing reaction is surprising, because the idea that there is an all-pervasive, all-powerful threat to free speech called cancel culture has become a central tenet of modern conservatism.
All right, so that was about Harrison Butker's commencement speech, in which he talked about the roles of strong men who become fathers and who raise their children. And it's interesting, he was dragged by a certain group of people because of what he said about women. I think he was celebrated in a way he wouldn't have been a couple of years ago.
Well, I'm a pessimist by nature, so it's a little premature as far as I'm concerned to declare victory in the culture wars. But I can say the fight needs to go on because this is extremely problematic and dangerous for our culture. Males have brought us positive competition, accomplishment, exploration, the desire to help others. The Boy Scouts, again, it's an ideal organization. It's based on the male desire for chivalry and goodness. And if we continue to tell males that they're toxic for simply wanting to live up to the best duties of maleness, we're gonna bring ourselves down to the rank of savages.
You know, Heather, it's interesting. I'm sitting here with Scott and with Sean, and I've never seen two guys smile or enjoy as much of a segment in comments as they just did yours. And Scott, you've talked about this and how important it is to have that and to have those expectations, especially in the African American community.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it made a huge difference. I'm a second-generation lawyer. I grew up with a judge. I went to Morehouse College, where they train you for leadership, and what they're producing out of Morehouse, about 2,500 students annually. It is important. I don't know whether we're disappearing per se, but I do feel this. I understand the perception that for some reason my masculinity is not as strong, perceived, or accepted in society as it was when I grew up with a strong role model in my family as a father, who was a judge eventually.
Well,
rest his
Leland,
soul. So,
go ahead, Heather.
If I can respond, if you want to see an institution where males are disappearing, look at the university. It's dominated by females in the student body, in the administration, and increasingly in the faculty. That explains this pro-Hamas hysteria. It has been these pro-Hamas protests have been led by females. The whole ethic of safetyism, the hostility towards free speech and academic inquiry, the need for trigger warnings, for safe spaces, these are all female attributes. And the university today is a feminist organization, and it is our future unless we figure out a language that says we are going to value males, and it is not the case that strong women can do it all, especially with regards to raising kids. Males and females are different biologically, they're different psychologically, they bring complementary attributes to child rearing, and males that are raised in a culture that says marriage is not important, you can go around serially impregnating women, and we're not going to expect you to be a man and raise your children, is a culture that is doomed to extinction. And President Obama, when he was running for office the first time around in 2008, gave a fantastic speech in the University of Chicago on Father's Day about the importance of males, but how they have to embrace their masculinity in a positive way.
Yeah, we're coming up on Father's Day, right? And Scott, you and I have talked about the influence of your father and how important it was. Sean, you just sat here and looked as the the dominant man, the dominant masculinity personified right here. Thank you very much. Heather, we want to put up your books and thank you as well. And I think it's important to point out that your opinions are backed up by a lot of research. There's a lot of people who come on TV and talk about things. The issues that Heather has written about are important, and it's both are important books. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Leland.
Yeah. New Yorkers don't agree on much. It's either the Mets or the Yankees, Jets or Giants. They now agree the influx of illegal immigrants is an enormous problem. Back to the original problem, though, they can't agree on what to do about it. Statue of Liberty at sunset in Manhattan. It was once the first sight in the American journey for millions upon millions of Americans, including my grandparents and great-grandparents. In one day in 1907, a record 11,000 came through Ellis Island in just one day. Today, New York is twice the size and welcoming 600 migrants a day, but welcoming is probably the wrong word if we're going to be honest about it. Newsweek writes, New Yorkers' quality of life hit by migrant crisis. A poll done for Newsweek found that more than 75% of New Yorkers say the influx of migrants is affecting their quality of life to some level and not in a good way. Councilwoman representing Northeast Queens, Vicky Palladino, joins us. Vicky, it's good to see you as always. Thank you. I know this isn't a surprise to you. Is the problem the migrants, or is the problem what to do with them?
Well, it's both. It's twofold. We're getting an influx. We can't compare 1907 to 2024.
Why not?
1907, we needed to build the city. Right now, we are getting an influx that are well over 200,000. Look at this. No place to put them, costing us billions and billions of dollars. The streets are not paved with gold here in New York the way they once were back in the good old days, when the Statue of Liberty said, give us you're tired, you're poor, you're hungry. The unfortunate part now is that we have no place to put them. And we've been talking about this for, a year now? Well, a little over a year, about the same thing. It's only gotten worse. We don't have anything to offer these people anymore. We are cutting back on our own services. New Yorkers feel left out. I heard your previous segments. I wish I was on the Seinfeld segment, by the way. That would have been a blast. But the segment before, I would have loved that. Oh my God, you should have given me 1 minute on that. But anyway.
Okay, well here, how about this? You got your minute. You got your minute right now. Seinfeld says dominant masked men need to come back. Go.
Yeah, man, absolutely, 100%. And any woman who doesn't think so has never had a real man. So we complement each other, and we are the yin and we are the yang, and that's just the way the world goes round and round. And I wouldn't want that to change for anything. But let me go back to the minorities. The minorities here in the city of New York are starting to feel like they are being left out also. Everything that
you mean the minorities here legally?
Yes. The black population, the Hispanic population that have been here forever. I mean, we have Hispanics that started a life here 30 years ago, earn a good living, became citizens or maybe not. But there was a way to do things. This has been just a flood, and we cannot keep up with it. And we see it's costing us $12 billion. Local upstate wants to give us $2.4 billion. That'll take care of maybe 3 months worth of migrants down here. She should take some up there.
Vicky, you make some great points. I can imagine what you're saying is the reason Donald Trump got a crowd in the Bronx last week.
Great.
Vicky, good to see you. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
Vicky can talk about anything. Here's Chris.
Thanks.